Welcome, 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 everybody. Happy Tuesday. Um, we are about to launch the Bring Your Own Control webinar. Um, I think we're going to have a lot of people, so I'm going to wait a little bit to let people kind of file into the room. In the interim, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Patrick. I am the Director of Marketing for QSC Systems, and I'm also one of the two training guys for Q-SYS on all those goofy videos. To my left or to my right, depending on how Zoom has decided to tile us. We have Kevin Rodas. He is an application engineer for the Central Region, and he's kind of been the mastermind and my partner in crime on this Bring Your Own Control journey that we've taken. Obviously, this is a pretty hot topic for everybody as people begin to go back to work. And so the goal of today's session is to show everyone a few tips and tricks on how to use Q-SYS to encourage good social distancing practices. Just so I have a kind of a baseline of where everybody's at, I'm going to launch a quick poll real quick. We did put together a short little video to show roughly the outcome of what today's webinar is going to be. I'm just curious how many people are coming in kind of blind to this webinar versus how many people actually saw that video. And it looks like the votes are rolling in, but it's looking like roughly, actually, more people have not seen it and than seen it. So, which is good because we're going to start the webinar off with a quick little example of what the outcome of a system would look like if you were to invoke all of these different scenarios. So this is like this is a test scenario. So let's imagine you've got a dark conference room, and I'm gonna quickly spotlight yours right now, Kevin. Spotlight. There we go. So let's imagine you're walking into a room, and just as you walk into a room, a motion sensor turns on not only the touch screens, but it also triggers the displays in the room to turn on. So again, nothing has been touched yet. As you can see on those touch screens, on the touchscreen on the left is a purely bring your own control message. So it basically says don't touch this touchscreen because it literally will do nothing if you touched it. It only presents you with a QR code which will allow you to bring this onto your phone and control the entire room on your smartphone device. If you want to build in a little bit of redundancy and you do want it to have an option for push controls on the touchscreen, but also a bring your own control option, the touchscreen on the right is an option for that. I don't know if you can zoom to the center. The third one is really just below the screen is just a printout of a QR code. Again, a little bit more of an analog way if you don't have touchscreens in the room. And then that screen above is a customized display, which essentially shows you a little bit of instructions on how to engage with the room, welcomes you into the room in specific, as you can see, Springfield Lab. So this is very specific to that room. And it also gives a bit.ly code, which will essentially get you to the same place that all of these QR codes will get you to. So I'm actually going to have Kevin pull his phone out like he's one of the normal participants, and he's going to scan one of those QR codes, and we're going to show you how easy it is to bring up a Q-SYS control onto your phone. Just like that, it's a simple scan and a quick pin enter, and voila, you are controlling the room just as if you were touching any of the touchscreen devices. And essentially, Kevin has taken full control out of the room. He's hosting his meeting, and his meeting is just about concluded. He's been in there, roughly 45 minutes or so, and he's ready to shut the room down. So there's a button on his
Your
phone that
meeting has
says,
ended. Before exiting, please wipe down all surfaces and reset all chairs to adhere to social distancing guidelines.
I recognize that voice. As you can see, the system displayed some good advice about wiping the room down. It played an audio trigger that encouraged people to reset the room and wipe down all the floors. And then at the conclusion of it, as you're walking out, all of the touchscreens and the displays automatically turn off. Again, all of this without touching a single touchscreen. So We are going to spend the next hour or maybe 30 minutes or so going through a top level view of how Kevin did this. We're going to go over a design file. I'm going to stop spotlighting you for a second. Well, or I'm going to spotlight myself. I don't know how to unspotlight. Anyways, I'll spotlight you again. So what the plan is to go over the Q-SYS design in a very high level detail. The design that Kevin is going to go over is at this URL right there, qsc.com/BYOD. So you don't have to necessarily take notes. The design file is available along with all of the raw audio files and the social distancing backgrounds. So it's all available at that link. What we're going to look at right now is an annotated Q-SYS design file. And I will say this before I turn it over to Kevin, that this design file is intended to be a conversation starter for your customers or for your stakeholders in the room. We encourage you to copy and paste from this and integrate this into your own designs, because obviously every design is going to be a little different, and everybody's guidelines for social distancing are going to be slightly nuanced. So depending on what your goals are for the room participants in the room, we would encourage you to take from this what you'd like. So with that, I'm gonna turn this over to Kevin, and he's gonna talk us through this.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Patrick. So here is the design file. Like Patrick said, you can get it on the website, and I believe it came with the invite for the presentation as well. And if you notice, we have all these little pop-ups here that walk through all the different portions that we just demoed. So we're going to sort of walk through the same process we just walked through and show how we can quickly integrate this into our design. And one of the unique, powerful things we have here is because we're doing our audio, video, and control all in the same file, we can integrate parts of that without requiring any additional hardware to do this. So we're going to start with our motion sensor down here in the corner. So the motion sensor you saw I used before, that's just a standard plain old security motion sensor. And it comes in as a contact closure. And so we bring that right into our design, and we can see we're just using a very basic logic block so that it's not constantly going off during our meeting. And this goes ahead and lights up both our touch panels. So we can light up both our touch panels if we have two in the room. We also use that to turn our display on. So we power on our display with it. And we use that to pull up our video on our NV. So pretty simple with our motion sensor. And then once our meeting is over, we go ahead and reset it so that it becomes active again. So very simple and easy to do.
And Kevin, that motion sensor is not necessarily a native Q-SYS device. That's just one that you got off of Amazon for like $20, right?
Yeah, it's a real basic, just went on Amazon, found security motion sensor that, gives a contact closure, and it's just wired right into the GPIO of my core. So cool. It could be a motion sensor, it could be a door trigger, it could be whatever you want to just trigger stuff to automatically happen in the room. So we've got our motion sensor there. The next thing we're going to take a look at is our NV. And so with our NV, we're making use of what's called the dynamic idle screen. So if you look on your example file, we actually have a schematic page that walks you through this and shows us how we can upload custom images. So we had the custom image for when we shut down. And so we can have up to 3 custom images that are shared between all our NVs in our system. And we can use our dynamic idle screen. And so I'm going to actually pop over to Core Manager.
And while you do that, this idea of the dynamic idle screen is a new feature that we introduced in version 8.3.1 or 2, I can't quite remember, but it was kind of it kind of flew in under the radar, but it comes at such a great time because again, it was originally designed to give some basic customized messaging for each room, but what a great way to show some customized social distancing messaging through these idle screens. And that's exactly what Kevin's going to show.
Yep. So you can see when we come into Core Manager and we choose our video endpoints, the first screen we have here is our settings, so we can load our custom images there. And if you go to that qsc.com/BYOC, we actually give you all these images we have. So feel free to use those or make your own. So I have 3 different images here. And then if I come over to idle screen, this is where we actually set up our custom idle screen. And so what this allows, we can see our little preview here, and we'll jump back to our TV in a minute to show it on the big screen. But we have some information on the left that gets shared between all our rooms. So this is where I can have my welcome to QSC. I can put our logo up there. I can put a background image. And then I choose each NV in the system. And you can see as I choose them, different information starts changing. So this is where I put in my room name, a phone number for support if we want it, and then my custom text. So this is where I put that bit.ly address. And you'd use the same address we're going to use in a minute with the QR code. You can just use that and go on bit.ly and make a shortened version of it and put your text, or just scan the QR code on the touch panel. So if I want to set up my second room, I can give it its own name, and this will be our conference room. And maybe their touch panel is, you know, they just scan touch panel located near door. And so we can have customized messages per room that shows up for each room, so they can be very specific and tailored to that room's message.
Yeah, so for example, if one particular room is of a larger size, there might be people that are tempted to put more people in there than you should. So if you can kind of anticipate how people may or may not abuse that room, you can customize that text to kind of remind people not to do those kinds of things.
Yep, and you could even put something in like, you know, room limit size or something, you know, so if there's only, you know, 12-person limit on the room, and you could show that information per room right on the screen right there.
Hey, Kevin, we actually have a pretty cool question. I think the answer is no for now. There was a question about whether or not you could use a text string to feed these blocks, and I don't think you can do that yet.
Not yet.
There was one other question that I do think we have a good answer for. Brad actually asked, you know, because we showed that motion sensor in the beginning, and he said, well, after you shut down the room, what's to stop the system from turning right back on when the motion sensor detects? And I think the answer is you just set up a little bit of delay, right?
Yeah, so you set up a delay, and we'll show, we have a meeting timer component we run. In that timer, you can set how long you keep the room running and then let it shut down. And so you can delay that out for however long you want. So if you're limiting your meetings to 50 minutes allowed in a room, you could set that for 10 minutes, and then it shuts off right after that 10 minutes that everybody gets out, or 5 minutes, or whatever time frame you decide.
Cool.
Perfect. So let's jump back over to our design. And the next part we're going to take a look at is our QR codes. And so what's really cool that we added around, I'm going to say 8.0 for the web UCIs, is web UCIs. And so what this does is the core hosts an HTML5 version of every UCI we have available in the system. So once you have your UCI license on the core, you can have as many UCIs as you want, and each one of those will have a unique web address. So to make this really, really easy, we went ahead and made a plugin, if you choose to use it, where I simply choose my network interface, and I choose if I want to use web UCIs or the iOS app. So there is a way to launch the existing iOS app if your users are familiar with that. If they're not, we encourage to use the web UCIs because it works across any device. So it'll work on iOS, it'll work on Android, it'll work on anything that you can scan the QR code with. And then this will automatically generate QR codes for each UCI I have in my system. So you can see I have 4 different UCIs, and each UCI gets its own QR code. Now, there's 2 sort of caveats with the plugin. 1, you need the scripting license to run the plugin. And 2, it needs internet access to be able to go out and generate those QR codes. So if my system is not on the internet, it's very simple just to make my own QR code and bring it into my design. So if I want to do the iOS app, we have a pop-up here that shows you how to do the iOS app. And if you're doing web UCIs, you simply come back to Core Manager once you've loaded up your system. come over here to UCIs, and I'm going to grab the UCI I want. And when I hit open, it will go ahead and open it right here. And I can just grab this address, come over here to any QR generator you'd like, paste your address in, and it will create your QR code. And then once I download this code, it's as simple as just bringing that right onto my UCI and just dragging that QR code right onto my UCI. So
Yeah,
very simple process.
that plugin is a nicety. We know that it's not for everyone because, if you are one of the kind of people that, doesn't want to invoke that scripting license, again, if the idea is to put these QR codes onto a touchscreen device, chances are you may have already purchased one or both of those licenses. But again, there's nothing to stop you from dragging your own QR code in if you're using, if you're using other methods. You don't necessarily have to invoke that scripting license. It's not for everyone, but it's a nicety if you happen to be connected to the internet and you have that scripting license.
Yep, and the QR codes will work exactly the same either way you do it. So,
yep.
So we brought our QR codes in, and like we showed before, we did two different examples here. So we have a QR touch panel where we simply just show our QR code, or we can very easily put that on our room touch panel. So I can simply see right here, somebody can scan it, but they still have the option of using the touch screen. And so this provides a nice backup method if they aren't, somebody doesn't have a phone with them or they're not on the Wi-Fi. One nice thing, if you do bring your own QR code in, is you don't necessarily need internet access. As long as the core can talk to the same network the Wi-Fi is on, that's all you need to be able to scan that QR code. It doesn't have to go out to the internet for anything. The other thing I went ahead and did here is I very quickly made a mobile interface for my system. So all I did to do this was I duplicated my room touch panel and changed the properties from being a TSC 80 over to being a iPhone. And it automatically resized it, and I just simply clicked and resized all my images to fit on my mobile touch panel. And now I have a mobile version that I can pull up. So you don't necessarily have to mirror the exact same room touch panel. You can build a specialized version just for a phone. So maybe the only control you want to give your mobile users is the ability to start the meeting, and everything else you want them to be able to require to use a touch panel, or you want to show different information on the touch panel. That's all possible by just making a separate mobile UCI and then making the QR code that I dump on here the QR code for my mobile UCI. And
Hey,
so
just a quick reiteration. Craig asked the question, does it work on other devices like Android phones?
Yep.
It absolutely does. Basically it is an HTML compliant UCI. So as long as your phone has a web browser, should look fine.
Yep.
There is, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm gonna let you keep going. I don't want to bury the lead.
Yep. So with our UCI, if you guys have taken our intermediate UCI class, this should look really familiar. This is all the logic that we use in that. And all I had to do very quickly for my mobile UCI, I didn't have to do any double program or anything. I simply brought another UCI layer controller and just wired up all my layers to follow what my main touch panel is. So that way, whatever I do, any button I press on my main touch panel or on my mobile touch panel will affect both touch panels, and everything will stay in sync. Now, one thing you may have noticed is we did add in a pin on here. So this is a way to provide some very basic security on the system so that somebody, if they happen to walk away and leave it up on their phone, they will see this pin screen right when the meeting shuts down. So in our touch panel logic down in the bottom here, we have a little password component. And if we look at our password component, this is just a series of a couple scripts, and they're all tied together. And you have two options here. You can use a component pin or a random pin. So I can type in just a set pin if I want to give a set pin for my room, or I can randomly generate a pin. And this pin gets regenerated every time we shut our meeting down. So every time the meeting shuts down, we get a new PIN number in here. And then we simply choose that and bring our PIN login. We just dump that right on our mobile interface. And now we have a quick way that they're required to type in a PIN before they start the meeting. So very simple, easy way to add just a little bit of security to it.
And important to add too on that PIN logic, that is not invoking any kind of additional scripting. So again, if your system doesn't have a scripting license, that's a component that you can bring into any system, and you don't have to use the scripting license if you don't want to.
That does have scripting.
Oh, that does. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, that one is scripting. There are ways, if you take our Control 101, we do show you how you can do passwords without
script.
But yeah, we do have some scripting in there. And it's a good example if you've been looking for a different PIN methods to show layers. It's a great example file for that.
Got it.
So the next part we're going to go over is once our meeting gets started. So I'm actually going to start it back up with our motion sensor just so we got it running in the background. And what we'll see is if I choose a presentation, we have this little meeting timer up here. So there's lots of places we've heard that a lot of people want to keep their meetings to a set amount of time. So this meeting timer is an example script we have in the design. And what it does is we can set what's our maximum allowed time. So in our scenario, we allow 50 minutes. And so what'll happen is we have our timer here and it'll count down. And to make it easy so we're not all sitting here for 50 minutes is if I hit the little clock, it's going to automatically fast forward to 9 seconds left. And we'll see what happens when we hit our time here.
Your meeting has ended. Before exiting, please wipe down all surfaces and reset all chairs to adhere to social distancing guidelines.
So it basically, whether you wanted that meeting to end or not, if your company has very, very strict guidelines, we do not want meetings lasting longer than X number of times. The system will basically act on behalf of management and shut the meeting down and get people out of the room. Now, again, this is a rather extreme option. You could, for example, set up an additional delay that gives them, hey, you got to wrap it up in the next 2 minutes or so. But that's just a simple example.
Yep. And so if you take a look in this meeting timer, this is a script that we have, but it's very well documented. So it's very easy to go in and manipulate. So this is right here. We have this line that says, edit for how long to lock out the meeting after it's finished. So default is 30 seconds. So I could set that to be my 10 minutes, and that's how long it would wait before it shut the room down and re-enable the motion sensor. So very easy to modify. Like we said, this is just a good example. You could very easily show pop-up on the touch panel, maybe just flip the NV screen to a image that says, hey, please wrap up your meeting, and then flip it back after a couple seconds. Lots of different ideas you can do with that.
And could you show them how that voiceover was triggered? That's just a simple audio player, right?
And that's our last part. So from here, we have our meeting shutdown that we triggered off here. That also could just be wired to your button that you press on your touch panel. And so when we go to shut everything down, we actually we trigger an audio player. So this is one really cool thing with Q-SYS. We don't have to go out and get a message repeater or anything. We can just throw a standard audio player right in our design. And now the audio player is set up to always play our exit audio file and just automatically trigger when we trigger our end of meeting message. And we actually also trigger, we can see right here, we choose one of our graphics on our NV. So in addition to audibly showing that message, we also visually show it. And we show it on a layer on our touch panel, and we show it on our TV. So, hopefully one of those three methods gets the message across to the participants that the meeting is over.
One scenario, so, that's essentially all of the tools that we're going to show. So feel free to run some scenarios by us in the Q&A. Jared's got one. He was like, well, okay, so what happens when the house cleaner comes in to clean the room? And then leaves if the motion sensor triggers the meeting to start. So just to clarify, Jared, the motion sensor didn't trigger the meeting to start. It literally just triggered the screens to turn on. And again,
Yep.
you could also pair that with some control to get the lights to turn on. And then
Yep.
you could use a separate timer that if there is no meeting that started and there's inactivity in the motion sensor, you can have the lights turn off
Yep.
at a given, at a chosen time.
Yep. And you could also very simply name some of the controls. So we have this lockout that we use here that's just a standard flip-flop. We can name our set and reset controls and schedule those in Administrator so that after 6 p.m. when we don't have any meetings, just lock out the motion sensor till 7 a.m. So that way it doesn't turn on overnight. So lots of different examples we can take with that. And like Patrick said, we could run a whole set of timers that if it doesn't start automatically, go ahead and do this. Lots of fun stuff.
Yep. While I wait for any additional questions, I'm going to throw that link back onto the chat. So qsc.com/BYOC. Again, this sample file is available. Those groovy audio files with that very soothing, sultry voice are available for download. The background images, all of that stuff is available, and there's a little bit of language on the plugin for the QR code. Again, that's for those of you who are new to Q-SYS. Actually, if you could quickly show them the asset manager for those that may be new to Q-SYS.
And then it is under. Oops. Where is it? Under. Just do a little search here. Right there. UCI QR code tool.
There we go.
And you'd simply choose install here, and once you install it, it will show up right in your asset manager under tools, and then I can just drag it right in.
Cool. If you could zoom out a little bit, Kevin, and give the folks a quick reminder of what requires a scripting license and what doesn't.
Sure.
There's a question about which of these BYOC things require a license.
The motion sensor doesn't require any scripting license. The meeting timer as we have it right now requires a scripting license, but you could accomplish this with some basic logic blocks as well. The QR code requires a scripting license, but to do QR does not require a scripting license. You do need a UCI license for that, but we're going to assume you probably have a UCI license because you have a touch panel in there. None of our basic touch panel control and synchronizing our two touch panels requires any license. The only thing that requires a license is the password component that we show, the password component that's included in here. But in Control 101, we do show you how you can do it without any license required. And then any of the NV stuff does not require a license, as well as the audio player.
Perfect. Quick question about meeting start. So Noel asks, is the meeting start just triggered by a user input, or can we pull in something else from a calendar application? Right now, I don't believe we can do that.
Correct. Yeah. Right now, it is just from a user coming in and starting the meeting.
Right. For a UCI, for an iOS option, do we need to have a hard link IP address on the app, or for the QR code to work?
You only need a hard link if the core is not discoverable on the same network. So if I have a very simple system and then maybe I just put a little wireless router in that room that they connect to, and it's on the same network, you don't need a hard link. But if it's on a separate network, so if I run my core on an AV VLAN and my Wi-Fi is on a separate VLAN, then you would need a hard link, which is one of the reasons we show our example using the HTML5, because you don't need a hard link in that scenario.
Cool. I think that we've answered all questions.
Awesome.
So again, we promised it would be short. It's super easy. We encourage people to tinker around with this file. I'm trying to think if they've got questions about, because Kevin was kind of the mastermind behind the design. If they have any questions, we certainly, you know what, I think the best way to do it is to go on to QSC support, throw in a help desk ticket, and that gets
Yep.
routed to Kevin if you have it.
Yep.
So just
Yeah.
reference that I was on the webinar and I have questions about
Yep.
BYOC, and it'll get routed directly to Kevin.
Yep.
And with that, we're going to leave you to it. Thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.